Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Today I have Tim Keiningham, who I think it's fair to say is one of the foremost experts on loyalty. Now, Tim, you were Global Chief Strategy Officer at Ipsos, and I know you are now focusing on the Wallet Allocation Rule, bringing that to business executives into the market. You've released some key and seminal books in loyalty. Loyalty Myths is the one I remember and have read. A very interesting book on the 53, I think, examples of where loyalty hasn't worked, and also why loyalty matters, which sounds a little bit more positive about about the movement.
Yes.
And most recently, the Wallet Allocation Rule. And following on from your Harvard Business Review article, customer loyalty isn't enough, grow your share of wallet. So, Tim, I think today what I'd like to do is just understand a little bit more about the where loyalty movement is at the moment, particularly with regards to Net Promoter and the dominance, if you like, particularly in industries like telcos that has, and why you think wallet allocation rule is so important. So, if we first start about the loyalty movement before we get into that. Thanks, Tim.
Well, where the loyalty movement is, people are very serious about the customer experience, no question about that. But I think that we're almost back to where we were in the early 1990s, because people are now focusing on just stopping problems. And I always go back to the seminal article that Fred Reichheld wrote with Earl Sasser at Harvard in 1990 called "Zero Defections, Quality Comes to Services." And it came from the zero defects. The idea came from the zero defects buzzword at the time for the quality movement. And the idea was really let's fix problems and let's not have unhappy customers, and everything's going to be fine. And that's where we are again with the widespread usage of enterprise feedback management software tools, which, by the way, I'm a huge supporter of. I think that they help get the voice of the customer into the organization, but because they were largely developed by programmers instead of loyalty experts, they thought of it in terms of customer has a problem, find the problem, go fix the problem. And not that that's not important, it just doesn't reflect the experience for the majority of customers. The majority of customers of any firm are satisfied, if not highly satisfied. And the reason for that is you have competitive alternatives, and there's no way you're going to continue to use a firm that doesn't satisfy you. So I think that over time they're going to discover that isn't going to give them what they want. Actually, we had a scientific paper that looked at these satisfaction with these discrete transactions, which is how it tends to be measured in these enterprise systems, and showed that it's not the dissatisfactory experiences that's causing the problem. It's the fact that you're not achieving the highest levels of satisfaction consistently if you want to grow share of wallet. And so all of those things are a real issue that I think that we're probably going to face a backlash when companies aren't getting the returns they expect after spending all this money to implement these systems. Again, I'm a big fan of them. I just think the issue is the focus, and we have to get back to what does it really take to get real loyalty. And getting real loyalty is about having customers who, they really want to do business with you. They want to give the bulk of their share of category spending to your brand. And so we need to shift our focus to share of wallet, as we call it, or share of category spending, and understand what it really takes to drive that. And that's really what led to the Wallet Allocation Rule. It is all about what is driving share of wallet.
Fantastic. What about the Net Promoter movement? Is that not a little bit more than things like satisfaction, customer effort, and focusing on getting your promoters, getting that delight?
There is no question. First of all, there's a lot of credit to give to the idea that what they particularly noted is that satisfaction or recommend intention or whatever measure you're looking at is what academics say is asymmetric and nonlinear. meaning that the impact happens at the extremes, and it doesn't happen in a very straight line way. And the good thing about Net Promoter is it did focus us on doing that. The problem is, at least the way it's been currently done, is that, you know, because Net Promoter is a firm level metric, not a customer level metric. The implementation is has been to focus on getting people into that 9 or 10 rating on that 0 to 10 scale, where 10 is the highest, and saying that everything is fine when I get to be a 9 or a 10. Don't get me wrong, it's obviously better to get up to have higher levels of satisfaction or likelihood to recommend, or whatever you're using for that that measure. And it will help you in terms of understanding retention. But the problem is it doesn't do a very good job of helping you understand share of wallet. Mm-hmm. If you take a person's Net Promoter classification and say, okay, let's assign a 3 to a promoter, a 2 to a passive, and a 1 to a detractor, and then you look at that customer's share of spending with your brand, and you just run a very quick correlation, or actually what you want is what's called the R-square, which tells you how much of the variations explain. It tends to be around 1%, meaning 99% of what's going on with how customers divide their spending is completely unexplained by this metric. And the reason for that is Net Promoter at the customer level can't put competition take competition into consideration, and that becomes a problem, because if I rate a firm a 9 or a 10, and I also use a competing brand, there's an 80% likelihood that I also rate my competing brand a 9 or a 10. Yep. So instead of actually winning, I'm tied. Or I could even be lower, right? I could give my brand, the customer could give my brand a 9 and the competitive brand a 10. So, and until we understand that, that we have to ultimately think at the customer level, and how do they feel not just about us, but how do they feel about the competition, I really can't understand why and how they divide their spending. So that doesn't mean, again, the Net Promoter is a bad idea, or that satisfaction is a bad idea. Of course we need to measure these things, and of course they matter. But we also need to make sure that we aren't deluding ourselves into thinking that we're doing an awesome job when actually we're a parity brand. We have to figure out what it takes to distinguish our brand, and that really requires, again, understanding competitive context. And the other thing that we tend to miss when we only look at our scores is that what is driving customers to use our brand is seldom the same thing that's driving customers to use the competition. They're going to different brands because they get something that they need from them that they don't think they get from your brand. And until you address that, it's impossible to grow share of wallet. So the Wallet Allocation Rule framework is designed to put everything back into a total market view of the way the customer really sees the world. And it doesn't mean that you don't want to have better scores. Of course you do. But we need to understand why people are buying where they are, and what does it take to shift our rank, if you will, to be the preferred brand vis-a-vis the competition.
Fantastic. What's the empirical evidence that this is better in explaining buying behavior, I guess, than the competing metrics or complementary metrics?
Oh, we were pretty serious about that. Because what you don't want to do is have this come out and then blow up on you. So, yeah. And this was developed with a team of academics, and we did a lot of academic research on this. In fact, probably the most extensive one is something called Perceptions Are Relative, and it came out in the Journal of Service Management. It was the lead article in there, and you can find it if you actually go to our website and just say walletrule.com, and then look, there's a section that says rock solid science. It'll link you right to it. But it looked at, I want to say something like 85,000 customers, 650 brands across 10 countries, all this stuff. And we looked at it not just cross-sectionally, but longitudinally, and we compared the measures to other different approaches to show that over time this really works. And even other people have done this sort of research. I mean, a person I admire a great deal who actually discovered the Zipf's law piece that we actually are building on, Jan Hofmeyer, has a wonderful piece that was in an SOMAR paper where he looked at the wallet allocation rule versus these more complex Zipf functions, and found they're basically identical in terms of how they work, and they do a vastly superior job of predicting share of wallet than the traditional measures.
And is this being used in anger? Are companies actively using share of wallet now?
They are actually. It's funny because they don't realize it most of the time. Most of the time they don't realize it because it's been put into the core components of the key products of TNS and Ipsos. And so if they use the brand value creator at Ipsos or the conversion model at TNS or the wallet allocation optimizer stuff, all of those pieces have that same fundamental law to link them up. So they're using it extensively, and they would be upset if I named brands, but if you actually go and see who's actually using it, they use it that way, and they actually tell them that these are the underlying philosophies. In fact, I would get calls even from competing organizations because they had read the papers and were wanting to understand the fundamentals of these models that they were using, and that was fine with me because what we want is the same thing, is that it work for everybody. Because if it doesn't work, then we have a real big problem, because then they'll say, this isn't working, got to throw the whole thing out. You know how it is when something blows up on a manager, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't want that to happen. And that actually was the reason for the discovery, because we wanted to make sure that if you're using net promoter or satisfaction or whatever it is, brand equity, that there's a way that you can ultimately link this up to the way customers divide their spending, as opposed to saying, I don't need this, so we can just track behavior, which has become the big part of the movement now. Because with big data, there's this fallacy out there that I don't need to know why. I don't need to do the survey. I don't need to do any of that part. I just track behavior, and I look for patterns, and everything will work out. But the problem is you can understand a lot about what people are doing and have no understanding about how you're going to build a strategy to change that because you don't know why they're doing it. And that's really what we're trying to get at.
Okay. I was reading some quite extraordinary figures because you had there that you're explaining about 0.8 or 0.9 of share of wallet or spend, whereas normal satisfaction or NPS explains only 1%. That's quite extraordinary.
Well, it depends. It's funny because when you send it to the academics and for them to do the reviews, they're going, of course. I'm like, of course. Well, why isn't it out in the scientific literature? But of course it's going to happen when you do this. Well, there's several things going on. One is rank has already been shown using the what's called Zipf's law, and it was a discovery by a linguist in the 20s from Harvard. And basically, he showed that rank predicts a host of different outcomes. The inverse of rank. So 1 would be used much more than 2 versus 3. And this law actually applies to a whole bunch of stuff, and it applies in not just businesses, but in terms of the size of cities and internet usage and all kinds of stuff like that. These power laws tend to be, the reason they exist is because they occur in so many natural phenomena. What actually kind of led down this path was there was a paper that showed that this same power law actually worked in predicting market shares of companies. And that was put out by two noted academics, Coley and Sa, I believe, and it was in a really top journal. And that the question was why? And the part of the reason why is share of wallet is one of the 3 main components that drive market share, the other 2 being penetration and the average usage size of your customer base. But share of wallet is the one that's controlled at the customer experience level. And so naturally there would be a strong relationship between share of wallet and market share. And the rank part of the process that was leading to market share actually was clearly shown to be part of this kind of zip function at the customer level. And it's funny because we actually have a scientific paper that's in process that shows how the penetration part of market share and the share of wallet part of market share, how they work together through this process.
So in layman's term, are you talking about preference? So I have my first preference is 1 supermarket, and I have 2 and 3 preferences, and that's what's driving, not a scale response 0 to 10.
That's exactly right. But the key to the thing though is you don't ask people to rank things, because if they do, what they'll do is if they use 3 or 4 brands, what they'll do is they'll rank them, from best to worst, even if a lot of them are basically tied in their mind.
Yeah.
And so what you want is an easy way to have ties. The easy way to have ties is just to say, how likely would you recommend, which would be a great example using the Net Promoter construct, or basically how satisfied are you with the experience, or whatever. You end up with basically the same answer. And what's funny about it, because once it's in a competitive context, and you wash out all the other nonsense about how people use the scale, and you end up with very clear distinctions that this is a clear preference. These are tied. This was a clear loser relative to the others, and that's kind of how the share of wallets allocations tend to wash out. So it was funny to us because we actually thought when we discovered it, the first thing we said was, "This can't possibly be right." That's all we said, because we were terrified that we were coming up with some really stupid idea, and that it was going to come up and blow us up later. And so we put it through a lot of tests before we were willing to actually publish anything on it, because the worst thing you want to be is the guy who goes out there and says, I've discovered the Holy Grail, and then everyone tells you you're a moron, and you can never get rid of it. So,
I like the practical example you gave about Walmart, I think. Do you just want to give paint a short picture of that? I think it was in the HBR article, just to give some clarity for people who maybe not be statisticians on what this means.
Yeah. Well, what happened with Walmart during the Great Recession? Walmart was one of the few retailers that was making a lot of money. All the high service firms going down the tank, but Walmart was consistently making money, and they felt that they had their competitors on their heels, and that they should go and fix the one thing that they're weaker than all their competition at, and they're consistently weaker than all the competitors in terms of the satisfaction of their customers with the shopping experience. And so they just figured that the one thing that they could do is up the quality of the experience, and everything was going to work out for them. So they implemented this initiative called Project Impact, and it was designed to have a better shopping experience. It was designed completely based on customer feedback. And they were touting it to the investment community as a way that they were going to ensure continued growth. Once they rolled it out, immediately when they rolled it out for all of their stores, they started the longest same-store sales decline in the company's history. But they did have their satisfaction scores go to record highs.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you are making the mistake of not thinking in terms of what's causing people to use your brand vis-a-vis the competition, really understanding what's driving your rank, then you're going to lose. And they lost big time because they stopped focusing on they focused on satisfaction instead of focusing on what was driving customers to the brand. They actually they lost, and the worst line that any CEO can ever say about your customer experience program was used by the CEO of Walmart. And he said, "They loved the experience. They just bought less, and that generally is not a good long-term strategy." And I've never heard it was just so clear and concise and terrible.
Yeah, very counterintuitive. You'd expect satisfaction scores to increase. Customer experience, great, improvements in growth, but that's kind of the opposite because they didn't consider in context.
Exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. So if people want to use the wallet allocation rule, how can you help them? Do you have training or articles or research they can look at?
There's all kinds of research they can look at. We actually want to make sure that's out there. So if you, again, at the walletrule.com where it says rock solid science, there's like 6 papers there. We already have 4 others in progress that'll be up shortly. Our deal is we're going to consistently test this and put it out to the scientific community for peer review to make it better. So those will always be up there. There will even be a certification program for those people who are really, really seriously into it, and that's happening through Fordham University in New York, I think, in a couple of months. But you can do this without that. And we even have a quick start guide. We have a quick start guide in the book, and we have a quick start guide available for free to download online. Because our goal is for this to work. Yeah. If we get people to do this, that's great. And I've had people emailing me saying, Tim, can you help me? I'm designing the survey, and I have a question. we respond, and we don't ask for anything because it's really very important. This is a passion of ours, and I'm sure it's a passion of yours, Stephen.
Absolutely.
You get into this space because you want to make the world a better place. I mean, that's usually the drive.
Yeah.
And so we're very serious about it, and you know, obviously, you know, every context is different, and so you know, there may be nuances that need to work for one firm and differently than another. But we've done it so many times that we tend to have good answers that help guide people through the process, and we're happy to share them.
That's brilliant. And if they want to contact you, should they go to the website or contact the company?
They can do that, or they can just do tim@walletrule.com, and it'll come right to me.
Fantastic. And one of the things that really resonated with me was your earlier statement about how customer experience seems to be being dragged into this controlling negatives. It's easy to generate an improvement in maybe NPS or satisfaction by taking out the negatives, yeah, and it's easy to see what the root cause is of those negatives. But for me, it's like if you can encourage people maybe to go beyond that, maybe beyond even customer effort score, looking at the true meaning of loyalty. I think that's what is encouraging to me.
Absolutely, and we're in complete agreement on this. Clearly, we don't want people unhappy, but if we had lots of people unhappy, we wouldn't need to actually even do the study. We would be having complaints and problems all the time. Most people, you know, clearly we don't want these failures, but that's usually not why people chose you. And what I always say to a CEO or a senior executive who tells me why they're doing this, I actually say, how many of your customers picked your brand because you were really good at solving problems you caused for them? And the answer is obviously zero. So you have to get back to why are they picking your brand, and what is it you're going to do to make sure that that is the preferred experience vis-a-vis all the competitors they can choose from. And once you get back to that, then we're getting back to what brought us in here in the first place. You know, it's not enough to say, yeah, that's okay, that's good enough. It's this place, this experience, this brand, whatever it is, however we want to word it. They know me so well that I enjoy being associated with this. I enjoy buying the product from them and using it because I know I can trust them, and that they have my interest at heart.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.